What's happening, everybody? Welcome once again to Syracuse Football Postgame, presented by Krause Health, the exclusive healthcare partner for Syracuse Athletics. You got Brent Dax, you got Chris Carlson here from syracuse.com. The Orange takedown UConn 31-24. The Huskies sure were pesky at the JMA Wireless Dome today, despite some huge numbers put up by Syracuse offensively. Syracuse quarterback Kyle McCord continues to set records. A huge showdown with Miami set up next week. Fran Brown's calling out ESPN. Bring McAfee. Bring Saban. Can we get Lee Corso into the auto costume? He wants game day here next week. What's the likelihood of that happening? Our Syracuse Sports Insiders are going to chime in to this one, as always. Love hearing from you guys as we did throughout the game today. And to be a Syracuse Sports Insider, all you have to do is text the word orange to 315-847-3895 or hit joinsubtext.com/Syracuse Sports. It was great to hear from a lot of new insiders today as our community is growing, and this will be perhaps the first experience Chris Carlson will have with a famous individual who has the secret voicemail line. So we'll get to that all coming up. But Chris, welcome, and thank you for being here. And wow, what an odd game. I mean, look at these numbers. Okay, Syracuse outgains Connecticut 538-352. Time of possession 37-26 to 22-34. Kyle McCord nearly sets the Syracuse single-game passing record with 470 yards. You're saying to yourself, wow, they must have won by 3 touchdowns, but it was a single-score game, and those pesky Huskies, those stubborn Huskies, just wouldn't go away in this one.
Yeah, it would have been real nice for those of us that made predictions if the score had resembled the way the game was played.
One of us should have taken the Huskies to cover 10.5, just for argument's sake, but alas, we did not.
I guess so. But, I mean, that is how you like UConn is that's what they've done, right? They sort of muck it up and they make games ugly and they play games close. They managed to do it here. Syracuse did not do a great job finishing drives. They missed 2 field goals. They settled for a third. They turned it over on downs. Those are things they can't do against Miami, right? Like that game is going to be probably a shootout.
Yes.
Miami's going to score points, right?
Yes.
Like Syracuse has to outscore Miami. And it's going to be a game where you have to finish all your red zone drives. You can't afford interceptions. And as good as Kyle McCord played today, like there were a couple near interceptions against UConn that he cannot afford to go throw against Miami. They got through it. That's what you can say.
Yeah, and the defense was the issue in this one. So you mentioned missed 2 field goals. They had 2 touchdowns taken away. One was an offensive pass interference. That was a Trebor Pena touchdown. He had another touchdown taken away by an odd circumstance, Chris. And while we're on the subject, we might as well address it here. I have never seen this before. It is certainly a rule in the book. They weren't making this up on the fly here. I have the exact rule, as a matter of fact, here, as our fearless leader, Nate Mink, looked up for us in this matchup here. I thought I had it right here in front of me. Give me a second, and I shall find it here. But Fran Brown certainly was not thrilled about this rule being violated, at least in the eyes of this officiating staff. So what happened was Trebor Pena basically came to the sideline as if he was going to sub out. Instead, Brown tells him to run the fly route. He's wide open on the sideline. He scores a wide open touchdown, we think. But then the officials say it's basically a deception penalty, right? You cannot fake you're going to the sideline and stay in the football game. He did. They take that away. So, Chris, that's where if you had Syracuse minus 10.5, you're pounding your fist on the table a little bit here because that's 18 points they had taken away. 2 touchdowns and 2 field goals that missed. I know I've never seen that before. Have you ever seen that penalty called before?
I have not seen it called. Never seen it called. Like, don't disagree that it should be a penalty, right? Like, but don't think I've ever seen it called in a game before.
Now, the interesting thing is, in postgame, Kyle McCord says they lifted that play from Ole Miss. And in a sideline interview on the ACC network, I've got the quote here from Fran. He said, "I don't know. I have no idea. I'm still wondering about it, about the penalty. Quote, they said he had to go all the way out, but I remember watching Texas A&M do it, Jimbo Fisher, but I'm Fran, so Jimbo gets different things he can do that I can't do. Now, of course, Jimbo Fisher's no longer at Texas A&M. I'd like to see that play he's talking about, Chris. Maybe that should have been called a penalty as well. But it's interesting that he referenced that, and McCord said, yeah, we took that play from Ole Miss. So it's one of those plays like, if the ref isn't paying attention, maybe you can get away with it, but it is a penalty. It is a legit rule. It is in the book.
Yeah, and maybe it's a sort of eye of the beholder type thing,
yes.
Right? Like how much of it is deception? Like how much, I don't know. Like to me, it makes sense that it is a penalty, but like if that's the case, it should have been called in that game so that you don't have a bunch of teams ripping it off and then wondering why they get penalized.
That was interesting. So Syracuse leaves all those points on the board. UConn puts up a score at the end, so they do cover the 10.5. I never felt like Syracuse was going to lose this game, but the fact that they just couldn't get away from this team was interesting today. And the reason why was Kyle McCord. 470 yards today. He keeps setting records. He is now the single-season passing record in Syracuse history. Kyle McCord and Cam Ward of Miami, who will both be on the field next week at the Dome, are the two leading passers in the country. McCord is tied for the single-season mark in terms of touchdown passes in a single season. 470 yards was 12 yards away from the single-game record that Ryan Nassib holds in 2012. He's 54 yards away, Chris, from becoming the first 4,000-yard passer in Syracuse history. He said in postgame that coming to Syracuse was the best decision he's ever made in his life. I think so. Look, there's one game to go, and we'll see if he can go out with a bang and beat Miami in his final game at the Dome, because I don't think he's playing in the bowl game that Syracuse is playing. I have no inside information on that. That's just an educated guess on my part. But, Chris, this guy, they hit the transfer portal lottery with Kyle McCord, and he has put up one of the greatest seasons statistically and by my own two eyes that a quarterback's ever had here. It's incredible.
Yeah, Fran said, and I think this is probably meaningful. He's like he set the standard for how we expect a quarterback to work here, and that sort of makes a lot of sense for me as like a new coach. How much of it do you put on the quarterback? Like, what are your real expectations for the hours that you expect that person to be in the office, breaking down film, to be involved in recruiting, to be involved in game planning? And we've heard all throughout the season that Kyle participates in at least small ways in all those things. And now, right, Jakari Williams has seen it. Like, all right, you want to play quarterback at Syracuse, like, this is the expectation. This is how you handle yourself. This is how hard you work. That to me is huge. And Fran said another thing that I thought was pretty smart. In terms of like having multiple wide receivers involved and that sort of thing. Like, a lot of that's Kyle, but like Jeff Nixon has done that is also Jeff Nixon's offense, right? And
for sure,
any quarterback who wants to come here, like the offense works. Like that is what you're coming into. Spread it around, pick your matchup, throw guys open type of offense, which, to me, if I'm a young quarterback, sadly I'm not. But that sounds like a great situation.
37 of 47, 470 yards. He threw for 2 touchdowns. He ran for a touchdown as well, and he still got some records to break, we would think. 54 yards away, 1 touchdown away from those records next week against Miami. And you hit the great point there that Fran said it. They're thinking ahead, right? I was down by the field watching warm-ups, and I was talking to a friend of mine. I said, watching the quarterbacks warm up, I said, do you think next year's quarterback is on the field right now? And we both said no. I don't think Michael Johnson Jr., who I found out this week, Syracuse confirmed to me, has a hardship waiver. He can come back for another year of eligibility. You mentioned Jakari Williams. Luke Carney technically was on the field. He visited this weekend, Chris, so maybe you could throw him in the discussion. But how hard would that be, given the standards that Fran just said, for a freshman to walk in and do that? And even for, Michael Johnson Jr. has been around the block a few times. He's a different style of quarterback. That's the thing, too. Like, when you're looking for a quarterback, be it somebody who's on the roster or in the portal or even an incoming freshman, you're not going to find another McCord in style of play. That traditional pocket quarterback, they're more rare than ever these days. So many quarterbacks use their legs and utilize that in their game. So how Jeff Nixon will make that adjustment next year, if he's still the offensive coordinator here. I mean, this guy's name comes up in some job opportunities. He's not going to take the Temple job, but who knows what else he could be a link to as the offseason approaches here and more coaches get fired. But while we are seeing an unbelievable season, we're also glimpsing over the horizon to see who is going to replace McCord. And to hear Fran said that, I know my eyebrows perked up when he said, that's the standard we have. And that's the standard he has set. And, Chris, look, lucky's not the right word, but the circumstances were certainly in their favor that McCord walks in, he knows Fran Brown. He knows a lot of players on this team. There's a comfort level. There's an adjustment that went faster in an era when it has to go faster because he knew a lot of people in the room. He knew Jeff Nixon.
And they got a little bit fortunate with Nebraska, potentially.
Yes,
right?
Nebraska was in play.
Nebraska sort of got ruled out when they had a 5-star decommit from Georgia.
Yep.
And, Matt Rule told Kyle McCord, hey, I think we're going to take the guy that we're going to have for years, and if we do that, we're not taking a transfer.
It's right? A great point.
And so that certainly, I don't think the choice was made when Kyle made his choice, but certainly, in a lot of those situations where Kyle doesn't know the coaching staff, where the 5-star recruit doesn't decommit, like Syracuse might be one more stop down the ladder. So that is the challenge. And the hope is that Kyle McCord makes this an attractive place that doesn't happen.
And you need those breaks, and that's the thing. McCord has sent the message out there that those top-level quarterbacks should put Syracuse on their radar, and Syracuse should be on their radar because, Chris, before we get to the Miami game, 8 wins. You have 8 wins in the bag. That's just the third time they've had 8 wins in a regular season. Correct me if I'm wrong. Since 2000, it's only the third time that's happened. It's rare. It has not happened a lot, for sure.
It's the second time since 2001.
Correct. So they have a chance at 9 wins, which is another thing that doesn't happen often around here. Our over-the-moon predictions, according to some, before the season, a lot of us had 8-4. I had 8-4. And I struggle with that. I almost said 7-5, just to be realistic about things. They could be, at the beginning of the season, when everybody looked at it, all things considered, Chris, a lot of people agreed the absolute best case scenario, everything goes right, was 9-3, right? Well, they could have
10-2, right?
10-2. Some people said, that's I think you were really pie in the sky dreaming on that, to be honest. But they could go 9-3 next week, and it's funny. I know we were talking about this in the press box before we left, a little feedback you were getting, and I saw some from our insiders as well. It's like, oh, well, if they beat Stanford and BC, they're 10-1. It's like, well, guys, that's football. You didn't. You lost. You lose football games at the end sometimes. It's not good that they lost the Stanford game and the BC game the way that they did, and Fran Brown and these players will be the first people to tell you that. I'm not excusing that. But, man, beggars can't be choosers. 8-3. With Miami coming to town next week, all the pressure's on Miami, by the way. You could walk out of there a 9-win football team. Every Syracuse football fan on the planet would take that. If I had come to you in September and said, look, guys, I have seen the future. This is what it is. Take it or leave it. All of you would take that. All of you would take that.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, and especially the way it's ended, right? Sort of on this surge when Syracuse never surges late in the season, right? Like this is where this team collapses, and for Fran to come in his first year, if he can have the year end like that, what a testament that what he's doing is working, right? In terms of how he's coaching guys, how he's asking them to compete, the depth he's trying to build. It would be one heck of a statement.
It really would. So Miami is up next. They are playing for a spot in the ACC championship game. We know that SMU is in. Miami has to win to get in. Miami is still trying to keep those college football playoff hopes alive, and they're the team that's in the playoff rankings now. SMU was one of the first teams out. We'll see where they are in the rankings this upcoming week, but that is a huge game for Miami. For those two things, 11-1, Cam Ward is likely out of the Heisman conversation. I think it's pretty much down to Ashton Genty or Travis Hunter. Maybe somebody emerges here in the next couple of weeks. But, Chris, it reminds me, I'm going to go old school a little bit here, when Gino Torretta came to the Dome in 1992 and had to shore up a Heisman campaign. Again, Cam Ward, I don't think is going to win the Heisman, but man, that game felt huge. Not that McNabb's senior year game didn't feel big, but that was not the true Miami teams. I mean, they were on, they had gone through sanctions and was just not the same Miami program that it was Big East Day. So here's Miami now looking to take over the ACC, and Syracuse can play spoiler while getting to 9-3 and just to cap what would be an incredible regular season. A huge game. So my first thought, looking ahead to that game, Chris, is the defense has to be a lot better. And you touched on it a few minutes ago. No Jaden Bellamy today. No Elijah Clark today. Clark could be back next week. Not sure about Bellamy. We'll see what Fran says about that going forward. But I think if UConn had a good quarterback, Syracuse could have been in a lot more trouble today. Cam Ward's one of the best quarterbacks in the country and is not going to miss a lot of the throws that UConn did today. So my first thought is what you said, Chris. Syracuse is going to have to – that's a shootout. You got to outscore Miami and just bend but don't break on defense, as Syracuse has done at times this year for sure. But, ooh, baby, that secondary is really going to get challenged by Cam Ward next week.
I thought the defense I was not I didn't think they were terrible today. They gave up one big run. You said earlier that there was no point that you thought UConn would win. There was a moment that I did, and it was when the guy was running for what should have been a 75-yard touchdown, and Justin Barron caught him and dove right, and got his ankle, and if that guy scored, it's a 3-point game, and UConn's got all the momentum at that point. That was the one moment where I thought, oh boy, this could get really dicey. And then once UConn had to punt after Barron tracked the guy down, it felt much more comfortable. But certainly the secondary and pass coverage has not been Syracuse's strength this season. It's going to need to be better. And, Kyle McCord's been tremendous getting the ball off quick, but Miami has the type of athletes up front that can get on him quick. And, I worry a little bit with DeAndre Reed. We saw him go off with the ankle injury. Miami's certainly going to try to get pressure fast right up the middle. That's another concern for me. And just, wide receiver depth. I know Fran said Trebor Pena maybe could have come back in the second half, but I don't know. and Amari Hatcher, he said it looked like a sprained MCL. That doesn't sound like a 1-week thing. So, you're starting to get a little thin on the wide receivers front too.
Yeah, Trebor Pena, for those that didn't see, left the game. He got X-rays. I was told it's a rib injury, so we'll see if he's back next week. You said it, Chris. Fran mentioned he maybe could have come back, but he'll be playing hurt if he does next week. Clark, Bellamy, Jean-Ray Reed did go to the locker room. He got X-rays as well, but came back out. Now, he's been dealing with an ankle situation. This game, it was more of a hand or shoulder issue. I think he got checked out, but Fran said he's been just gutting through it all week, so all year, really. And there's a number of guys. Everybody's hurt this time of year, but there's some key players that Syracuse is going to need all hands on deck to beat Miami. And look, Davian Kerr, I think he got picked on a little bit today by UConn. I think that Barry Buxton Jr., or the third, actually, I think had some rough spots in this game. Syracuse gave up a 71-yard run on 4th and 1. Now you're selling out for the short run, and you kind of spun out of it, and there's nobody in the secondary, right? Yep. It's not the first time they've given up a long run like that this year, Chris. Cal did it, and I know there's one or two others where teams have done that. I'm just not thinking of off the top of my head. So Ohio did it. Yeah, great point, going all the way back to the beginning of the season. So these are little things that add up, like missing 2 field goals. The penalties, whatever. Those are fluke things. They happen that take points off the board that Miami will just eat you alive on. Now, Miami's 10-1, but they're not – nobody in college football is indestructible. I don't want to build anybody out to be unbeatable. Syracuse can beat Miami, especially at home. Like I said, matchup-wise, everything, that's one conversation. Miami's got all the pressure on them. Syracuse is playing with house money. It should be a pretty good crowd next week. It's Thanksgiving weekend, so the students will be out of town, and that's going to be kind of weird, but Miami typically brings a lot of fans, and Miami fans everywhere. They're one of those fair-weather teams across the country, and I think people are pretty juiced to see this one. Today, Chris, just an announced attendance of about 35 and change. It was the lowest attendance of the year, if I'm not mistaken, for this game, right?
Yep. Which, same sort of problem, twofold, right? The students aren't there. And then, if you're sort of a fair weather fan, or a casual fan even, maybe not fair weather, but Syracuse football isn't your life. Like, if you can pick a game to go to, you're going to pick Miami over UConn.
That's
so
it.
Maybe,
yeah.
Right. So maybe this isn't the Saturday you're coming out to the Dome. Next Saturday is.
And I think you got people in town for the weekend, for family. It's something to do. When the schedule came out, you said it. I think that's the one people circled and said that's the one. Tickets are a little more expensive for that. The average ticket for UConn, or the lowest ticket, pardon me, for UConn was, I think, $13. And you can always find deals on secondary markets and everything. Always be careful when you buy tickets from those places. The lowest ticket I saw this week for Miami, Chris, on Ticketmaster, just straight go buy tickets, was $62. So that's going to cost you a little bit more, but it's Miami, It's not UConn, as we saw this week, and UConn actually gave Syracuse a hell of a game. By the way, fun note, I sent it to our text insiders, and I put it on Twitter as well. Jim Mora Jr. has a unique pregame routine. He likes to run the stairs at the stadiums that he goes to. So I walk in, I put my stuff down, I see a man running up the stairs with his AirPods in. And I'm like, oh, that's Jim Mora Jr. It's the coach of UConn. He ran. I didn't know if he made it around the whole dome. That would have taken him probably a long time, but that was kind of fun to see. I don't know if Miami coach Mario Cristobal does that, but we shall see. So plenty of time to talk about Miami, Chris, as we go through the week. I do want to note this before we hear from some insiders. So Fran Brown called out ESPN at his postgame press conference, specifically asked Coach Saban and Desmond Howard to put in a good word for College GameDay to come to Syracuse for the Syracuse-Miami game. And he says as I believe he said, I hope they accept the challenge to come. There's no better place to be next week. Chris, as we speak.
Shoot or shoot, Brent. Shoot or shoot.
Shoot or shoot, baby, right? Make the ask. Is it likely that College GameDay is going to come to Syracuse? I'm going to say no on that one. Now, currently, Texas leads Kentucky late in the fourth quarter. They're going to win that game, okay? So long as Texas A&M beats Auburn tonight, and as we speak, that game has not started. There is, I'm going to say, 99% chance, because you always got to leave a 1% window of something weird happening. Texas A&M wins, they're going to that game. Texas A&M, Ryan Field, and everybody's like, well, they've already been there. Doesn't matter. Game Day has been places twice before. They've done that. Think of the atmosphere there. No offense, Syracuse fans, but a Syracuse, New York on a 30-degree cloudy Saturday with students out of town versus one of the more electric atmospheres, the 12th man SEC title matchup on the line. Like, that's where they're going, especially with ESPN's investment in the SEC now. Now, they don't have one in the ACC, but we know what's going to win that argument, Chris. So if Texas A&M loses tonight, maybe we got a discussion. Remember, Clemson plays South Carolina next week. They're not going to go to Ohio State, Michigan this year, so that's out. So it's a rivalry weekend. It's big. I mean, it's a big game. Don't get me wrong. I just don't know if it's game day big. Fran called him out. Dream a little dream, maybe, but I'm going to probably say no. College GameDay being here next week.
You know, I've always thought about it in terms of picking the biggest game, but I think you make an excellent point just about like the environment matters. And without the students here, right? We know what it would be like with the students here. That's why it was so great at Cal. That's why Cal did such an awesome job early, but that Cal had students on campus. And there's just so many more people. All of Texas feels like they're invested in Texas A&M, right? And we have all of Central New York.
We're going to lose that one, unfortunately,
Probably,
right?
Probably.
And you got to remember something, friends. ESPN College GameDay is a TV show, right? And they're going to want all the TV show aspects of being a TV show. And I just don't know if Syracuse-Miami delivers on that. But like I said, if Texas A&M loses tonight, I don't know, maybe we got something there. So we'll keep an eye on it.
It would be fun. It would be fun.
It would be great. I don't get me wrong. Syracuse has come close twice. In 2019, I reported this out, Chris. They were coming. If Syracuse beat Maryland, they were coming for the Clemson game that year. They lost to Maryland. 2022, Game Day was coming. If Syracuse had beat Clemson for the Syracuse Notre Dame game at the Dome in 2022, Syracuse lost to Clemson. Game day did not come. So they've come close. There are 6 programs that have never hosted game day for football. Syracuse is on the Power 5 programs, Power 4 now. Syracuse is one of them. I don't think it's going to be this week, but weirder things have happened. Chris, let's hear from our Syracuse Sports Insiders. You guys were fired up during the game, sending me texts. I was sending you texts, and that's how it works. Being a Syracuse Sports Insider means you get direct text message access to me, news, inside opinion analysis from me, from you. We had some insiders this week, Chris, that went to the Syracuse UConn game thanks to fellow insiders because they texted me and said, hey, I got 2 tickets, can't use them. How about an insider go to the game? So to all of our friends out there that got to go, thanks to our insiders. Shout out to Nick. Shout out to Dahmer, 2 of our more passionate insiders who were at the Dome today. Sorry I couldn't catch up with you guys today at the Dome, but great to hear from you and the great experiences you had coming back to town for this game. Keith D leads us off, Chris, and says the offense has been fabulous this year, but Fran's buddy as defensive coordinator has been the reason for 8-3 versus, he says 10-0, but I think he means 10-1 at this point. Or no, it would be 10-0. No,
10-1.
No, I'm sorry, 10-1. Yeah, I was doing my math correctly.
I don't think we can blame Elijah Robinson for the 5 interceptions. It's bad.
Right.
I mean, listen, this is my opinion. You hired a first-time head coach. You hired a first-time defensive coordinator. If you thought everything was going to go perfect and they were going to behave and they were going to coach like they've done it for 20 years each, what made you think that was what was going to happen? This is a long-term plan where Fran and Elijah build up this program through their ability to get talent, and both are widely respected coaches. But yes, there are going to be some bumps in the road, and the switch from the 3-3-5 defense was always going to be hard. That is a defense that essentially says, we know we can't be great up front, so we're not even going to bother trying, and we're going to scheme our way around it.
I have some frustrations with the defense. We've talked about rushing 3 versus 4 and some coverage issues, and
blitzing.
Listen,
I know is
blitzing.
I know blitzing.
I get it. I had somebody contact me and said that there's some people that are going to put pressure on Fran and John Wildhack to make a change there. It's like, guys, remember, you lost Marlo Wax for a big part of the year. Injuries have piled up in key spots. Even this week, no Clark, no Bellamy, right? Jeff Nixon's been really good, and I think people have been spoiled by that. But Jeff Nixon's also been around the block a few more times in the coaching circle than Elijah Robinson is. So I think it's getting. I think people just need something to complain about sometimes, and that's really kind of taking the cake here. But I don't know. I think people are getting a little too over the moon on that too.
Yeah. I mean, I just if you're going to hire a first-time coordinator, you're not going to fire him after a year.
You got to let him go through the growing pains.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's part of it.
Jack W. says, if UConn had a better quarterback, this one might have ended badly and missed a lot of open receivers that Cam Ward won't. With our injuries piling up and Miami needing the win next week, it might not. From Ed P., who says, obviously his score was closer than the game really was. But, geez, Cuse has to learn to close out games. They keep letting teams hang around, need that killer instinct. Shout out to Gill for his great game. From Mark B., who says, what could have been? Beat BC and Stanford, and Cuse is playing for a spot in the playoffs. We were just talking about this. But I'm just so happy for Coach Fran and the players. Now let's shock the Hurricanes next week. From Brian, who says, don't mistake me for being a downer on the progress, but I, for one, do think game day's I think he means it's not a good idea for next week. We have barely put together a full 4 quarters of football this year. It's a special group, but we need our next shot at a big stage to go right. It didn't against Pitt, and we can't afford another slaughter like that right now. I don't know if it would be a slaughter. I think Syracuse can run with Miami. I just think they're not ready because there's no students, atmosphere. There's just a lot of things not timing out right for game day to come here. I don't think Chris, they have been featured on game day before. Not in Syracuse, but now this is a while back. Both times Syracuse was featured on game day, they lost 59-0 to Miami and 62-0 to Virginia Tech. So, I kind of get that fear in a way.
I don't think Miami is that juggernaut, but I get it. I understand the fear, but I don't think Miami is this, incredible team. They've played a lot of close games this year.
They have played a lot of close games this year. Cam Ward's had to pull a lot of close wins out of his back pocket in the fourth quarter for sure. And they've gotten some calls. Let's be honest here. There's been some big discussions in college football this year. The Miami ACC reps.
We did it back-to-back weeks.
That's right. Jim Phillips getting on the phone, calling in to the command center on that one. Allegedly. Frankie S. says, it's been a long time since we felt this good about the Syracuse football program in earnest. Everything's on the table next week. Miami in the Dome. A chance at 9 wins. Possibly a shot at the Gator Bowl. All we could have asked for in season 1 of Coach Fran's tenure. There was a Gator Bowl rep today in the press box, pardon me, by the way. There was also I believe it was the Tropic Bowl, which is a all-star game for college seniors. That's in Orlando in January. Reps there today. But the only, air quotes, official bowl game that I saw, Chris, unless I didn't spot another, was the Gator Bowl. But that'd be a big one because that'd be a matchup against an SEC team.
Yeah, and it's a bowl game people know. It's just a name. It's a name that we're all familiar with, which brings a little cachet. Which
reminds me to watch out for the Chris Carlson Bowl Watch coming your way later this week. And one final text here from Joe R. I'm happy with the win, but unhappy with the lack of focus and intensity. Losing 2 wide receivers will be huge for the Miami game. We'll see if Pena's back. And did we mention Amari Hatcher earlier? Unfortunately, he got hurt on a onside kick by UConn late in the game, and that one looked pretty bad, Chris. Fran said it might be a sprained MCL. He could not put any pressure on his right leg at all. He had to get help off of the field, and I'm not encouraged. I'm not a doctor. I just play one on a podcast, but I'm not encouraged we're going to see Amari Hatcher next week, who was the only receiver, it seems, that didn't have over 100 yards today. Jackson Meeks, Darrell Gill Jr., who had an amazing game with 177 yards, and OG all over 100 yards today.
Yeah, they've done a really nice job. They're just diversifying the offense, picking the right matchups. Someone made the point that Syracuse has like the 3 leaders in Pro Football Focus contested catches category. Yeah. I think that's probably, I don't know if it's just, I don't think that's true 50-50 balls. I was talking about that with Nate Mink. I think it's more, defender in the proximity, but like Kyle throws a lot of his receivers open and they break and everybody's on the same page. So like, yeah, he's throwing it and the receiver and the defender's right there a lot. And they're making that work.
All right, Chris, I believe this is your first time with this experience here. We go to the secret voicemail line. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, he doesn't always call. Sometimes he's got to gather his thoughts, and it's just not enough for a voicemail. But I am happy to tell the people here, because the people demand it, that we have a voicemail from Rock and Ron. So, Chris, this is how this works. When Emily and I would do this, I have not heard this. You have not heard this. We are listening to this for the first time along with everybody on this show. Let's see what Rock and Ron's got for us this week.
Hey, Brent. Rock and Ron in Florida. Congratulations to Syracuse to get their 8th win of the season. 8-3. I'll take that all day long. Now, the offense, what an awesome day by McCord. Over 470 yards, say. 3 different receivers with over 100 yards. Unbelievable. What a great, great day for Kyle. Now, the bad part about all that passing was we have absolutely zero running. That offensive line is not moving a fly. I don't know what it is, week in, week out. They just cannot run the ball. But I'm sure Coach will get on that again this week. Defense, great. They bent but didn't break. Although our corners gave up, I thought a little more than they should. But then again, our starters were out with injuries. And hopefully we get them back for next week. And a big problem, if we don't do it, it's going to be a long day, is if we don't get pressure up the middle on Cam Ward. It'll be a long day if we don't put pressure on him. We haven't been getting pressure up the middle, and we definitely need that. And other than that, should be an exciting day with Kyle against Cam. and might come down to special teams. And right now, it could be a little hairy, but again, we'll be working on that this week. So just want to say, until next week, I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to talking with you guys again. So until next week, later.
The legend, Rock and Ron. Some great points there, Chris. We didn't even mention. Only
very measured. That was very measured.
Absolutely. Only 68 rushing yards. That's a good point. They'll probably have to run the ball a little better, even though we anticipate this being a shootout. Sometimes the running game falls by the wayside in that case. They do have to get pressure on Cam Ward. The pressure didn't come in this game until late. They did finally start getting some pressure on UConn's quarterbacks. And boy, Rock and Ron brings up the special teams thing. There was a couple iffy punts today, the missed field goals. Jackson Kennedy had been doing great. Now, one was a 52-yarder at the end of the first half, so I'll give you that one. But that 36-yarder, it looked like there was a bad snap. And, Chris, a few texters told me, I think somebody got a piece of that kick. I don't know if that was fully blocked, but the snap, and if somebody did get a hand on it, that wasn't like a clean kick that Jackson Kennedy just missed as well. So, based on what we've seen from him, I'm pretty confident he can recover from that. So, all good points from the legend Rock and Ron. Chris, here we go. He said it. Cam Ward, Kyle McCord. It's funny how we say that because it's technically not quarterbacks against quarterbacks, right? It's the quarterback against the other defense, but it sells, right? McCord versus Ward, and they are literally the two best passers in the country in terms of yardage. So that's going to be fun. We'll be all over it this week and looking forward to getting you ready for that matchup. Speaking of Kyle McCord, guys, Chris has a great story up on Kyle McCord. Chris worked on this for weeks, talked to a lot of people, put it together. There were some circumstances. It was going to come out at one point, and then, we have a weekly football meeting, and we'd kind of like put the cards on the table. Is this the week, Chris? We're going to get the Kyle McCord story, and it is out. It is excellent, and Chris gave us some terrific insight on that. So thank you for that, and a terrific job on that, sir.
Well, thank you for your patience.
Thank you for your patience, for sure. So get ready, kids. Syracuse and Miami next Saturday. We'll, of course, have our post-game show. That's a 3:30 kick on ESPN, whether game day comes or not. We'll have a basketball post-game show Wednesday night. I have a pod coming out Monday with Don McPherson. I was going to ask Chris this, but I kind of put it in my back pocket. I'm going to save this question for a pod later this week. So I'll You know what, Chris, before we go, if you do want to chime in on it, I'll give you the floor. Is Kyle McCord now on the Syracuse quarterback Mount Rushmore? Right? You got Donovan McNabb, Eric Dungy, Ryan Nassib. We can quibble if either Marvin Graves or Don McPherson goes on that last spot. Eric Dungy, I mentioned. Like, there's enough guys to have a conversation about it. But McCord has set a number of records. He's going to set a couple more in all likelihood next week. All things considered, I don't know. He's in the conversation.
Yeah, I'm gonna dodge. I'm gonna dodge because he's close, but how do you put him above those guys? But how do you not? So I will be very interested to hear what Don says, and what his opinion on it is. And knowing him, he'll probably take himself off because that's the type of guy he is.
Right.
But
the rightful owner, by the way, in my mind, of the 1987 Heisman Trophy, Donnie McPherson, will join me on the pod on Monday. So we will talk McCord and so much more. Looking forward to that. Chris, thank you. Thanks for all your great work this week and today at this game and for joining us on the pod. Thanks to our Syracuse Sports Insiders, of course, for your great insight and texts throughout the game and being a part of this podcast as well. You guys enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you again here on Syracuse Sports on Monday with our guest, Don McPherson.